Allora, siamo qui insieme a Jim Mullen, per me uno dei chitarristi più preparati e più genuini e originali a livello mondiale. Siamo qui per il sito guitarprof.it e sono veramente anche un po' emozionato di intervistare Jim perché è veramente pieno di cose che sa trasmettere. Noi siamo qui tra l'altro presso l'agriturismo Borgo Bottaia, dove stiamo facendo un seminario di chitarra insieme anche a un altro insegnante, a Manuel Consigli, che intervisteremo in seguito, e siamo più o meno a metà seminario, poco più. Quindi abbiamo delle cose da dire anche riguardo a questo seminario, ma io inizierei subito a intervistare Jim e terrò l'intervista in inglese e poi produrremo una traduzione scritta per chi non conosce bene la lingua, e questo video verrà pubblicato presso il sito guitarprof.it. So we can begin. I said that we will go on with the interview in English.
Yeah.
I'll try to do my best regarding the pronunciation and also the articulation, like when we play with the guitar.
Right.
And the usual question we do to introduce an artist is how you began with music and with the guitar, generally speaking.
Well, that's a really good question actually, because growing up in Scotland, I was surrounded by folk music, and especially the bagpipes, the music of the bagpipes, which makes some people run for the hills. It's quite a brutal kind of sound, but my mother always used to sing around the house. The radio in those days was always Bing Crosby, Frank Sinatra, Dick Haymes, Tony Bennett, singing all the great standards. And my mother would be going around doing all the domestic stuff and singing along. So I would be hearing all this, and then when I first started playing jazz, I kind of half knew all those songs because of when it soaks in when you're a child, the way you learn things by osmosis. And also she told me a story that when I was a little kid, she used to offer to read me a story in bed at night, but I said, no, sing me a song instead. So there was something about music that I was really attracted to, and I'm really trying to express that attraction every time I play. Music is an important part of my life. I need it the same way as I need food. It's a nourishing thing, I think, music, and I'm always trying to take advantage of that.
Interesting. So you had a kind of school at home,
Yes,
in a way.
My mother's academy, yes.
Yes. And then how you began with the guitar, with studying the technique, the chords, the first
Well,
chords,
there were no
things.
teachers
No teachers.
where I was in Scotland. So you gained what you could from other musicians. I had an older friend. I lived in the poor part of the east end of Glasgow, my hometown. I was maybe 8 or 9 years old, and I had an older friend who was 15, 16, and he had an archtop guitar. I'd never seen one before. And one day he said, come on up and put on some jazz records. In those days you could only get jazz from the west coast of America, which was essentially white. You couldn't get the east coast stuff, which was essentially black, from Philadelphia and New York. So the only records you could get would be like Barney Kessel, Tal Farlow, Barry Galbraith, all the guys who were working in the movie studios in LA. So they were playing jazz for fun and making money on the movie soundtracks. So you saw the pictures on the back of the sleeve, and these guys would be by the swimming pool in Hawaiian shirts. I mean, they weren't ghetto people at all, They were very wealthy. And the music sounded a little bit like this, but still, it was alien to me. He played me this, I was 9 years old. What is this? Music from Mars. I didn't understand anything. But something connected. I don't know what. Maybe the rhythm, maybe something. And I used to go up and knock on his door. Can I hear that music again? Sometimes he'd say, okay, other times he'd go away. You know, not today, kid. So I was a nuisance to this guy. But he, eventually, I got a guitar. I used to do a paper round after school and deliver newspapers. And I made a little money, and my dad let me buy a guitar on payments. And I started trying to figure out, and he showed me some things, you know, some chords, and from that point on, I was really just trying to understand how to play this music. I'm still trying to understand that, actually.
It was a classical guitar, acoustic guitar, electric guitar?
It was acoustic guitar, but it was a very poor, you know, one of these mass-produced things from Sweden. I think it was called an Egmont. It was a plywood guitar, and the strings were like this. You know, you had to be Arnold Schwarzenegger to hold down a club.
And so now you're very strong.
Well,
with your feet.
I'm old now. I'm not very strong, but it was. It didn't matter that it was hard to play. I had a guitar. I was able to make. Before I could play chords, I could play a double stop, tonic and fifth. This is music. You know, I was just fascinated with making musical sounds. You know, and that kept me going. Then I became more involved in jazz, and I got a double bass. I became a double bass player, and because I could understand the bass part, because they played the fewest number of notes. You know, they only played 4 notes in the bar. The other guys were playing 16. So I mean, I could figure it out from the bass end, and from that point on, I got a better guitar and started figuring out some of the chords that were happening, beginning to understand more about the music. And from that point on, it's just been, it took over my life. I mean, I was a journalist for some years in Scotland. I worked for a couple of newspapers, and I enjoyed that. It was very nice, but it wasn't fun like music was. So I got a chance to move to London to join a group and to be a professional musician. So I took my nerve in my hands, and quit my journalist work, and moved to London, and I'm just stuck there ever since.
And so you began, and I know you are a kind of self-taughter in your way.
Yeah, completely self-taught.
Completely self-taughter. Yeah. This is interesting.
Maybe the last generation, you know,
yeah.
are completely self. All the guys I play with now went to music college, so they learned correctly. Yeah. My way took much longer. They learned in 2 years. It took me 20 to learn by myself, you know, by just going through trial and error, practicing, failing, trying again, and it's a much slower process.
Just a short question. Do you think that this thing to be a self-taughter can help you to be original and in a way very personal in your approach?
I'm not sure. I think that most of my heroes, they didn't learn to play like that in college. You know, they figured it out on the bandstand. So, and I think there is something to be said. For instance, if you look at the way music education works now, like for instance the Berklee School in Boston, which is regarded as the top jazz college in the world, they're all learning the same thing. The guitar players, you know, they get their degree by learning Pat Metheny transcriptions. All of them learning the same stuff now. And the saxophone players by learning Michael Brecker transcriptions. Now, it takes a lot of ability to be able to do that, but it puts young players in the shadow of someone so established. How do you get out from that? How do you find your own voice? I think it's the difference between teaching a whole class and teaching one-on-one, where you might be able to find out what someone is good at and help to encourage their personal development.
That's interesting. So you are in a good lineage of musicians that were all self-taught, or almost.
I'm not putting myself in any fancy group here.
I know.
But yeah,
that's a joke.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Wes Montgomery is self-taught, a wonderful guitarist, and you know, I mean, apparently he couldn't read a chord chart, but he could hear. Yeah. And I mean, nobody's ever done those chord solos like Les played. You know, no one. I've not heard anyone do that. You know, even Joe Bass. But Wes was just the most incredible creative guy. Nothing could stop him, you know. So I think there's something to be said for both. Obviously, you know, talent cannot be silenced, but I wonder whether the methodization of teaching jazz doesn't allow for the personal side of it to develop.
Yeah, I agree.
That's just my feeling. You know.
Or at least you really need to have both. Maybe the academy, but together with the real ear training and
you need information.
Yeah.
But how do you personalise that? That's the trick, I think, you know, to help someone find their own way of personalising everything they learn. You know, I think that's, I mean, I try and tell students this myself, you know. I mean, be brave, reach out, try things. Don't be afraid to try, because you discover things when you try. If you don't try, you don't discover anything.
This is an important thing that we are also saying during this seminar.
Yeah, absolutely.
We are together with Jim, and he encouraged us to try, to be brave, to...
And all the students responded, which was wonderful. You know, they all tried. Some people were a little scared, but I said, try it, it's all right, you know. And they did, and they got some confidence, and they reached out a little further. So I like that.
Yeah. So doing mistakes also is a part of
learning. Yeah, absolutely. If you don't make a mistake, how can you then move on and do something that isn't a mistake?
This is a really important point.
Yeah, absolutely. I make mistakes every day.
And now we create a link with Wes Montgomery because you are very famous around the world because you use just your thumb to play. Sometimes I've seen you also
fingers.
when you do some rhythm or bossa nova, you use also the other fingers, but usually when you take a solo, you use just the thumb also to play a theme. And maybe you can say something about that also if there are other things you have already said in many other places.
No, I mean the thumb is not a very smart way of playing the guitar, you know, especially my way, because the thumb, you know, whereas pick players can play up and down, with the thumb you can only play down, so you have technical restrictions right there, you know. But we all have technical restrictions of some kind. The idea is how can you maximize the music that you can make with what you have, you know. So a long time ago I realized my technical limitations, but I stopped letting it make me feel terrible. I accepted it and I tried to make the best music I could with what I have, technically. I'm still trying to do that, really, you know. I think the technique is secondary to the motivation to try and make music, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, why do you take it out of the case? You're trying to express something, you know, and that's how I look at it, you know.
This is interesting. And so maybe, I already know you, but we have to speak also for the listeners.
Yeah.
And do you did some study regarding harmony or scales, all these things that usually the people, though, also the self-taught can study to have some tools?
No, I didn't really study it. I mean, I've been very fortunate. And what got me into jazz in the beginning was because I could hear very well. You know, I had good ears. I could recognise sounds, and I became fascinated with harmony quite early on, actually. And I really wanted to understand. So I talked to piano players that I worked with in Scotland when I was still a teenager about how they voiced chords, you know. And you can't voice a guitar chord like a piano because they have a big stretch and they can play many notes. On the guitar, you may only have 3 or 4 or 5 notes in the chord, where they have many more. So I was really to try and understand the mechanics of harmony, because I think harmony is very important, because it underlines whatever melodic ideas are happening and it makes it sound stronger. So I was always fascinated by harmony, but I had to figure it out just by trial and error again.
So you have a relative pitch, very good relative pitch, and this permit to you to play a melody by ear, or also play licks,
Yeah.
a lick or something like that, and it's a. Do you have some suggestion for this for the people that like, because for me I think this ear training, natural ear training, is very important. Maybe more important than the information, the intellectual. Maybe.
Well, I talk to my students about the George Benson method of scatting in unison with the guitar. It's great ear training, you know. First of all, you have to find out what your vocal range is. But within that, you can play, because it's the same brain that's creating the idea. So you can both sing and play in unison. And it's a very good way of getting your ear to recognize different sounds and to respond to that. So I think that's good ear training. But you can't play something you don't hear.
It's true.
You know, you have to hear it. Anyway. So you need to get your ears working. You can't really improvise if you can't hear what's going on. So I think ear training is very important.
You have to do the effort.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. I have another question, and I think an important one regarding how to accompany a singer, or also how to interact with a band when you play like a guitar player, because soloing is just a very little part during a song. So, do you have something to say about that?
Okay, well, I regard myself as an ensemble player, which means I have to make my part fit with what the other musicians are doing. You know, I've always been conscious of that, and so I mean, for instance, I was very fortunate to work and record with the great American pianist Gene Harris of the Three Sounds. You know, a wonderful swinging piano player, and he liked to have me play Freddie Green style, the 4/4 rhythm. You know, which I had never done before. I thought that's kind of old-fashioned, right? He said, no, I like it, and he taught me that this adds a certain kind of density to the groove at the mid-tempo. It does really, and maybe it's because the rhythm part is maybe making the fewest number of note changes from chord to chord, whereas the bass player is everywhere. The piano player may be running arpeggios, but the rhythm guitar, maybe one note changes from chord to chord. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I began to understand why he liked this. You know. No, I love doing it. In fact, a lot of the accompaniment that I did for my students this weekend has been me playing Freddie Green style with a 2/4 feel on the bass end, you know, because it's a nice, simple support. But other than that, I mean, if you're working with a singer and you're not playing Freddie Green style 4/4 rhythm, you'd have to choose more carefully how to support but not dominate, and how never to do too much, because you can obliterate what the singer is doing, you know, especially since she's also telling a story. Yeah. So to be sensitive to what's required, you know, some singers sing way behind the beat, so you have to be careful that they don't trip up. And some singers sing ahead of the beat, you know, so you have to be kind of flexible about all this, you know. But it's not a technique that you can teach. You know, it's a learned technique by doing, you know, like many things in jazz. So I was fortunate that I got to work. I've been accompanying people for maybe the last 40 years or something, you know. So I've kind of learned, in a way, how to do that, whatever the style of the music is, how not to do too much, but to listen and to support and maybe push a little sometimes if it's required, you know. But always try and make it rhythmic, even if it's just stabs. They may want to be gentle stabs. They may be more, you know, more urgent. But you're making a judgment call and all of that. You know, it's not an exact science, but it's something I love doing.
Like you told me before, it's something that you learn on stage.
Yeah, absolutely.
In practice.
Almost everything I did was learned on stage.
And this is an interesting.
But now they wouldn't allow you to do that. You know, they won't allow young musicians to learn on stage. They're only taking kids who've qualified from music school. So you're not allowed to be a complete beginner like I was, you know. But different days.
So this is interesting. And maybe you told me you produced like 4 or 5 CD with a singer.
With my wife.
With your wife.
Yeah, Zoe Francis.
Zoe, and these CDs were produced just guitar and voice?
No,
or
no,
there
no.
was also a band?
Oh yeah, always a band.
Always, yeah.
The first one we did together was a live recording, and we weren't looking to make a live recording. She actually wanted some video to promote, to put on, you know, YouTube or something to promote, so she might get some work. But the guy who did the video brought his recording machine and microphones, and at the end of the gig, he said, "Come and listen to this," and I put the headphones on. It was the most fantastic live sound. You know, it was a great band. I mean, wonderful English saxophonist Stan Saltzman, who's on one of my albums. Great piano player Gareth Williams, very creative. Italian drummer Enzo Zarelli from Torino, who lived in London. He's now back teaching at the Verdi Conservatory in Torino. He played in an English bass player, Mick Hutton. And we didn't have a rehearsal. And my wife has very specific requirements, songs, and she sings really interesting songs. But we did the whole thing without a rehearsal. And these guys are so good and so smart. They played great. And it sounded wonderful. It sounded like we've been playing together for ages. You know, one of those, you can do this with jazz. You know,
Yeah, I understand.
a live performance can just lock in with the luck of the enthusiasm and the good sound, and recorded in a very nice jazz club, which I've played many times, and Franco has also been with me, the 606 Club in Chelsea. Very good basement jazz club, you know. And we thought, we have to use this. We can't just use some video to promote. We've got a live album here. We had 2 hours of great performance. So we picked the best tracks, and it became Zoe Francis Live in London. And then since then, we've made 2 albums. She has a thing called Bluetown Trio with a fantastic organist called Ross Stanley, me on guitar and her singing. And Ross Stanley is one of those guys who plays the organ like an orchestra, bass pedals and chords and everything, and all the different sounds. And it sounds like a much bigger band than just a trio, you know. Also, Zoe chooses very unusual songs, very attractive. She's turned me on to a lot of songs I never knew before, including the themes from Cinema Paradiso.
No, Cinema Paradiso.
One of our favourite movies. You know, I love that film. And we found some English lyrics for 2 of the themes. So we made a little arrangement and recorded it. It came out nice. And things like that, you know.
And this arrangement is enclosed in some of these CDs that you produced, so it's interesting. Then we will leave a link if some people would like to buy one.
Well, Zoe has a website, but she also has some stuff on YouTube.
Zoe, I don't know the pronunciation, the correct
Zoe Francis.
Zoe Francis, the wife of Jim, is a very good singer, very good jazz singer. So maybe we will have another opportunity to interview her with you, maybe in another event in the future. Very interesting. And you also told me that you have a new project, so you are working on a new CD where I have to say also this thing, there will be also a piece of you, by you.
Well, I mean, I gave you the first album that we did with this group.
Yes.
I've always played in small groups, trios and quartets, but this is a 9-piece band, and with horns and, you know, and the arranger, a very talented flute player in London called Gareth O'Crane, and a wonderful arranger. I call him the Gail Evans of London. And he writes these beautiful arrangements of my tunes, you know. Also some standards which I've re-harmonized, you know. We did Spring Is Here as a samba.
Yeah.
We did When I Fall in Love in 5/4, which works quite nice actually. Just, I like to kind of try and personalise standards if I'm playing them, do them slightly different from how they're normally done. And anyway, Gareth O'Crane wrote beautiful arrangements of my songs, and we're going for a Volunteers tour with this 9-piece band, and hope to record it sometime this year. We've got the funding. We did some crowdfunding, and because recording is expensive, you know,
Yeah, I know.
especially with
Yes.
9 musicians. You know.
Yeah.
So-
and you need good technicians.
Yeah, everything. So we needed to do some crowdfunding, but I think we've got the money now. I'm just waiting for Gareth Locraine to become available so we can put some dates in the diary, because they're all a bit busy. All the musicians on these records are very successful musicians, so to get them together
Not easy.
takes some planning.
Yeah.
So that's the idea. I'm very thrilled to be looking forward to doing this.
So let us know.
Yeah, absolutely.
The project will be
Sure.
completed. Do you think do you have to say something regarding some musicians that were your reference, like you spoke about Wes Montgomery? Are there other guitar player or piano player that you wanna speak about, just to say
Well, how long have you got? I mean, a million.
million?
A million. I mean, I take something from everybody that I like, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, but I always go for the feeling of their playing. You know, if they play something I get a feeling out of, then I try and incorporate that. But I try and incorporate it in a kind of personal way, so it goes in the brain through the system, and I try and find a way of utilising things that I've enjoyed from other people. I think it's part of the problem of trying to personalise everything you learn in jazz. So how can you put your own voice? I mean, I'm not an original player, you know. I don't have an original voice, but I may have a slightly original interpretation of things. I'm not sure, but I think that's the challenge. How can you personalise whatever it is you're trying to play?
Yeah. In fact, you read my thoughts, because this is another, I think, important thing in jazz, to be original. So you can study, you can be influenced by many people,
Sure.
but at the end, you have to be yourself.
Absolutely.
Try to be.
That's all you can do. So even though you may not have the technique of some players, if you can maximise the use of the technique that you have, that might be enough. You know, if you can express what you need to express with the technique and the limitations that you have, that's good enough for me.
And maybe the last question we can ask about your activities, like a musician, like a guitar player. Not just in the past. We can read many things, maybe in the web, regarding your previous projects, but now, together with the new CD that you are preparing, what do you do like a musician to live? You play in clubs, you have some special events, or also teaching, like in this seminar, that's another part of the world.
Sure. I did another seminar a couple of weeks ago up in Wales with a similar number of students that we had here, and that was fun too. In fact, the thing about doing seminars and taking students is it forces you to put into words how you approach playing, because otherwise I would never talk about it. I would just do it because that's how I feel. But you have to put it into words to explain to others why you do something. So it's a learning process for me as well as the students. But in terms of work, I mean, I won't lie. Work has been harder to find since COVID. Many of the small clubs have gone because they had European staff, from Italy, France, Spain, Portugal, and they weren't entitled to any furlough money, so they went home. Also the whole Brexit rubbish, and that's made Britain kind of almost isolated. Terrible, stupid idea based on lies.
Yeah, I understand.
Really, it's going to cost a fortune to fix all this. It may not happen in my lifetime, but we'll be back. We'll be back in Europe. We'll get rid of these stupid people who went to Eton College. But anyway, where was I? Okay. Oh yeah, work. I mean, I do guest spots where I travel up and down the country and play with local guys. I also have my own trio, and we're doing some festivals this year. I'm playing at a festival in my hometown, Glasgow, a jazz festival in the summer. I'm also doing the Edinburgh Festival, and a few gigs Also with my wife Zoe, I play in her band, and she has some gigs, and a mixture, a mixture.
I understand.
Yeah.
It was really a pleasure to talk with Jim.
My pleasure, Luigi.
We are in a way colleagues, but also friends, and he's really the kind of musician that I would like to have, like a master, like a teacher, like a friend, because during this seminar he always encouraged us. Also, if our level is just a beginner level, encourage us to be real jazz player, and that's important. So thank you a lot, and we really hope to hear you again or in other places of this planet.
Thank you.
This strange planet. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Mm-hmm.
Grazie.